Well, let's start. This morning we have an exciting lineup of experts with whom I will shortly introduce you, and then we will listen to short presentations by each of the experts. After the presentations, we will have questions, and also you will have the chances to ask your own questions in the webinar. So please don't hesitate to write your questions, and we will have the chance to read them. But let's start with the presentation by Luciane. Luciane holds a PhD in planning and decision analysis from the Royal Institute of Technology, KTH Stockholm. Her professional experience includes research and teaching in urban planning and design, regional mobility, future studies, sustainable cities, urban agriculture. And Luciane has led and participated as a researcher in many EU projects. She's also teaching the topics. So Luciane, the floor is yours. Please give a short introduction what you are working in the context of urban agriculture.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Maya, and thanks for this introduction. I'm very happy to be here and then to share like a few perspectives on the future of urban agriculture on the nexus of legislation and innovation. But I will begin just by sharing like some facts. Well, we know that urbanization is a trend that is persisting. Yeah, 50% of the world population is urban, 75% of people in Europe they live also in cities, and in the Nordic region, this is about like 71%. We also know, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization, that almost 80% of the food produced is consumed in cities. Yeah, and another fact is that unfortunately, like our food systems, they are not very sustainable. We have, like, for example, more than 1/3 of the global greenhouse emissions is attributed to the way that you produce, process, and package food. Also, 40% of the global land is used for agriculture, and agriculture also uses like 70% of fresh water. So actually, it's not very a good picture. But also, like, beside of this alarming facts, we also have like a large body of research that actually tell us how much or like how urban agriculture can contribute to more sustainable cities. First of all, it can like help like shorten our supply food chains, as growing like food in cities actually like diminish the distance between where food is produced and where it is consumed. So this means like less emissions with transportation and less food waste as well, as around like 25% of the food is wasted with transportation. Also contributes like to climate adaptation. Yeah, urban agriculture enhances like the cover of vegetation in cities, which increases like the infiltration capacity of the soil, and then also like contribute to improve the management of stormwater runoff. Improve local climate conditions, microclimate conditions, support biodiversity in cities, contributes as well like to circular economy, as like waste, urban waste can be turned into resources, for example, like through composting of organic waste, or even like recovering like nutrients from wastewater streams. And of course, there is a lot of other advantages when it comes like to social and cultural. For example, like the strength and the connection between like people and nature. You get to know like where the food is produced and how it grows and so on. And also improve like human health and well-being, and can be also like an inspiration like for more healthier eating habits. I've been researching on the urban agriculture since 2018, and this is like 3 projects that I've been participating in, which they touch upon somehow like aspects about urban agriculture. The first one was a Horizon 2020 project, See You Green. I invite you to go to the Nordreg website, and if you have interest to know a little bit more about these projects. But the first one was like a kind of exchange of experiences in Europe and China about how to use urban agriculture as a kind of mechanism to help in the circularity of resources in cities, about like different technologies such as composting and also like recovering of nutrients. And then Tango project, which is also a European funded project, urban transformative capacities for food, water, and energy, which we work like with different like urban labs, living labs. And Maria, who is here, she will talk a little bit more about the experience with Stockholm Stad. And then also like Nord Green, which is founded by Nordforsk, is a smart planning for green and healthy Nordic cities, in which we touch a little bit about how urban agriculture can also be a mean like to promote health and well-being. But just like to share some highlights about urban planning, why, despite of all this, a lot of benefits that I told, why that is still not part of like this, the planning systems, not like a formal part of like the urban. Yeah, and one of the main reasons that is very much discussed is about like the competition with for space in cities, yeah, and also perhaps like some other conflicts with other functions. But there is, however, like a possibility to actually like to improve this. And then one way, because of course we have to exploit like all these co-benefits that I just talked about like how urban agriculture then can improve like the not only as a kind of has been a bit accepted more like as a community gardens, but we have to go a little bit beyond that and also see like the value of urban agriculture, like to improve the ecological function of cities. So we need for this, like in our like public sector, we need a more holistic approach to support urban agriculture by integrating both like in different governance levels. Within the municipalities, we need like a better conversation between like how different departments, education, health, and like urban planning and so on can profit from urban agriculture, can find like a way of getting benefits from this. And then as well, like across like different levels of planning. For example, we can enhance like urban agriculture to be part of the local agendas, to bring this into Agenda 2030, for example. And then also like we should as well like the needs to have a cooperation and partnerships of like different actors, like in especially to bring into the picture as well like the private actors. About innovation then, how it is like, I see actually that innovation is a pathway for agriculture like to become like embraced in urban environment as like a kind of an urban function, that it is accepted and desirable for all. That nowadays, as I said, is just like in the periphery, like there has been a lot of different efforts, more like a bottom up, like with community gardens, but I think we should go like one step further on that. And I think technology also promised very much about like decoupling, like the land from food production. There is like the Z farming or like the zero acreage farming, which it is like about like how to grow food in buildings, how to grow in rooftops, in agri walls, and even like in dark spaces. And this is an extremely great potential. Also other technologies such as aquaponics that brings like a lot of savings as well, like in terms of water. So we have a lot of space in cities that actually can be used. And then another thing that is very important and that I think we should make a case for is that in the future, urban agriculture has to go beyond the production of leafy greens, of salad, and actually like go more like to produce like nutrients that people can actually then live with, that is necessary like for the health, for a health diet of everyone. So yes, I think I will stop here. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Luciane, for such an interesting insight and already lots of food for thought. But we keep our discussion to a later stage. And now I would like to invite Maria from Stockholm's Royal Seaport and talk about more, introduce yourself and also what you do and your work during the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maya. Yeah, I was a bit late in trying to send Maya the information about myself. I'm a civil engineer by training, but I've moved more into sustainable urban development, and I'm working as a research and innovation coordinator at the at Stockholm Royal Seaport. Stockholm Royal Seaport is one of Europe's largest urban development areas, and it's supposed to be the flagship for urban sustainable urban development. And it's also going to be a testbed, or is a testbed for systems that we hopefully will bring into the rest of Stockholm and also other municipalities. Urban agriculture in Stockholm Royal Seaport, or in Stockholm in general. I'll start with the old pictures. Already in 1906, the first allotment gardens were introduced in Stockholm. They were a part of sustainable food production in the city, and during the war times, they were very, very important. And in 1917, I think, 158,000 kilos of potatoes were produced in these allotment gardens. So they've been a very important part of food supply in the city. The allotment gardens have been highly attractive, and another 5,000 allotment gardens have been created. So now we have about 10,000 allotments in Stockholm. And the other picture is from one of the gardens where Abdullah is producing tomatoes, and he's a recreational gardener, but he produces about 500 kilos of tomatoes each year in these 100 square meter allotment gardens. So these gardens are really important, both from recreational and pleasure point of view, but also from a productive point of view. In this case, he doesn't sell his tomatoes, he hands them out. He has visitors coming to his garden every year. So is this what we're talking about, urban agriculture? This is one part, but land in Stockholm is very expensive. So now industrial farming is coming up. Lots of different technology companies are producing leafy greens mainly, that are sold both or produced in dark spaces, but also produced now in shops and in restaurants, which is nice. We're saving transport, but it's still leafy greens. The other picture is a newly started company where they're producing 17 different types of mushrooms in 25 square meters. It's a very small production unit at the moment, but they're looking for funding to expand because they see a big market in local produced mushrooms. So these are initiatives coming up in Stockholm, and they need space. So what is the space? Luciana was talking about different spaces that we actually have in the city. And a few years back, Bjorn, who is going to have another presentation, he was part of this research that was done. If we would grow about 10% of the greens, of the vegetables locally, what would that require? They were investigating the amount of rooftops that were available, parks, abundant spaces, etc. So they did come up to the conclusion that it is possible to produce about 10% of the food in Stockholm within the city boundaries. But we need to have new policies for green spaces. We need to have partnerships that would allow these kind of ventures. And we also need to develop the food market to incorporate locally grown food in this. So how do we make it happen in Stockholm Royal Seaport? This is just a picture of one of our very green, lush gardens. This is a private garden within Stockholm Royal Seaport, but there's hardly any edibles here. There are some strawberries as a edge on one of the plant beds, but there's nothing edible. How could we make this more into edible things and still make it look very beautiful? Are there other areas that we could use. So within that, we have a policy. We have a policy for sustainable urban development, and we have this goal of introducing productive ecosystem services in our green structure. We have a tool called the Green Space Index. At the moment, it doesn't have any productive ecosystem services, but we would like to see if we can introduce productive ecosystem services into this tool to allow or to create more edible things in our gardens. Through the Tango W project, we are also looking at trying to define what the potentials in Stockholm Royal Seaport is. It's quite a dense urban settlement. There's very little space for parks, etc. But yesterday we had a very interesting workshop where we, together with an architect and together with Bjorn, were discussing the potentials in one of the settlements. And the roof space, it's an abundance of roof space. It's an abundance of wall space, but we need to have these cooperations with developers. How do the developers find a financial system that would allow them for this? So this is what we are exploring at the moment, and within the next year, hopefully we'll have a study for the potential, and then we'll see what comes out of that is actually feasible to implement.
Thank you so much, Maria, for this great insight. And also already Bjorn's name was mentioned many times until now. So let me introduce Bjorn. Bjorn is a marine biologist with many years of experience in water systems, plant and fish farming. Bjorn is the founder of Svensk Aquaponics, and he's also currently a PhD student at the Swedish Royal Technical Institute. Svensk Aquaponics, in collaboration with other companies, aims to create the best possible conditions for ecological and sustainable system solutions in Sweden. And also, how we just heard, Bjorn is participating a lot in these public discussions and really brainstorming very needed ideas for the development. So Bjorn, the floor is yours. We see your slides, and go ahead.
Thank you very much for your kind presentation. I guess I just tell the technician to change the pictures. And so yes, this is my little greenhouse in the north of Stockholm, south of Stockholm, where I grow tropical plants. This is my small sort of experimental place where I try a large number of different plant species, and I'm also trying the technology called aquaponics. Next, please. For those who still doesn't know about aquaponics, it's a very simple system. Basically, it consists of fishes, plants, and bacteria. The entire system starts with the fishing being fed. The nutrients from the fishes are being pumped to plant beds where bacteria grow on substrates and decompose the fish waste into nutrients where the plants absorb them. The water is then circulated back again. Basically, yeah, it's next, please. Aquaponic systems can be constructed in many different ways. This is just one of them. And it can also hold many different species in one system. What you see here is the grow beds where you have a media in the front of the picture here, where the bacteria lives and decomposes the fish waste. The fish tanks is sort of behind our backs in this picture. In the other end of the greenhouse are floating rafts with leafy reeds, and from there the water is pumped back to the fish tanks again. And this is just one of many different varieties of the aquaponic system that can be constructed. Next, please. So why do we do aquaponics? It's extremely water and nutrient efficient. Nothing goes to waste. We don't change any water. We just add water that is being harvested away in form of fruits and plants, or that is evaporated. It's also possible to have many different species in these systems. I'm trying to currently always test new species. There are no pesticides and no antibiotics, since that will disturb the systems. The only thing that we actually add are beneficial insects that are eating away on the aphids and things like that. We sometimes need to add a little bit of micronutrients also, but it is not always the case. There are no emissions or nutrient flows from this building. It's just sort of a bubble of its own, and thus it can be placed anywhere. It also creates this very stable production year round. I try to grow only perennial plants. And it can also be possible to coexist with other activities, since you can form the systems. You can, for instance, have a restaurant and production in the same place. Next, please. So why do I grow tropical plants? There's a fact that the climate change are already affecting global production. And the growing zones, as the temperature rises, growing zones are moving upwards and downwards in the system, leaving areas where that is simply too warm for many plant species to grow. And that will start competing, that production will start competing with other areas that are already used. So many areas will simply be unsuitable for farming. The southern part of Spain is one of the places that is right now suffering from severe droughts. California in the United States is the same. There are also new diseases affecting production. What you see in the picture is a fusarium fungus that are affecting banana plantations. Once the fungus is there, no banana production is possible within 30 years due to the spores being left in the soil. So there's actually a lack of food is actually a reality. It can happen even in our big cities in our modern world. And also, when it comes to aquaponics, the fish stocks in our oceans are getting more and more depleted. Already now, more than 50% of all fishes that are eaten have actually been farmed. The next, please. So a few pictures from my little facility. Here we have plant-eating tilapias waiting for the foods, and that's the only nutrients that come into the systems. Next, please. The nutrients are converted into plants, and I try to grow many many different kind of species. This is bananas. This is the head of the technical museum here in Stockholm also. So I produce about 100 kilos of bananas a year. But funny enough, the production time and the production volumes in this greenhouse does not differ from the production volumes and times, the production times for instance, the Canary Islands or Madeira, where these banana species are grown. So next, please. And also a large number of plants are being grown. Papayas, for instance, are always transported by air freight since they are so sensitive. They also harvested green, which affects the nutrient composition and also the taste. My papayas are always harvested at the prime ripe time to enhance taste and nutrients. So this is just some examples of what can be made. Next, please. Another species, we can also create very ornamental areas with this. We can coexist with, like I will show you a picture later on. Next, please. Same here. Many of the plant species that are being affected by drought or erratic rain patterns around the world, vanilla, coffee, for instance, the prices are going up very quickly. but we can easily grow them here in the northern countries in a controlled environment. Next, please. Here are some of the species that I have tried and are growing. Many more are possible. And what you simply have to ask yourself, are you willing to live without these species, without these products? In Sweden, for instance, we import more than 200,000 tons of bananas each year. That's more than 22 kilos of bananas per person per year. So, and we're one of the greatest consumers of coffee per person also, but we have no production. Next, please. The final picture. This is a winter garden called Bovieran. 20 of these exist at least in Sweden. 1,600 square meters of greenery. And unfortunately, this is quite beautiful. It's very nice, but it's all mostly ornamentals and very low productivity. I made a little thought experiment that I simply ripped out all the plants and replaced them with production plants like bananas, papayas, fishes. And the production in this building could easily be around 16 to 20 tons bananas, 4 tons papayas, 2 tons of fish, and many more. And there are 20 buildings in existence already. And I believe this is one of the future solutions that we can apply in cities. This can be placed directly in the cities, or cities already existing buildings can be converted into these kind of places. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bjorn, for this very visionary and amazing presentation. We have already a couple of questions coming in from the audience. Thank you so much for that. But let's move to the last presentation and then we will discuss everything. So now I would like to give floor to Arne. Arne holds a PhD in horticulture and is a leader of Nibio Sarheim Research Station and does research in the Department of Urban Gardening. Plant selection for urban forestry, shelter belts, plants' responses to climate and CO2, vegetation's ability to collect pollution, and the role of urban vegetation in storm water management. So we are digging deeper into what has been already kind of introduced, all the possibilities and like nature's response to what's happening. So Arne, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the invitation and the introduction. My presentation today is about a Norwegian strategy for urban agriculture, which is called Cultivate Cities and Towns. So I've got an assignment from the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, and the aim is here to make some guidelines to municipalities for the implementation of the strategy. Next, please. What is very exciting about urban agriculture, horticulture, is that it's so diverse. It's about growing plants, of course, but it's also about culture and social relationships. But people are always in the core. Next, please. So the aim of the government strategy for this is to facilitate urban agriculture through cross-sectorial cooperation, which is, of course, very important to realize. And the strategy, I think, is very ambitious. They are using words like making cities and towns greener and more pleasant, making space for greater biodiversity and improve public health and increase value creation, and making more resilient cities in the face of climate change. It's also interesting to see that they aim at using cities and towns for cultivation, planting, and green structures, which should be combined with other purposes, and this should increasingly become a part of the urban planning. Next, please. So the strategy is also based on a very broad understanding of the concept of urban agriculture. So when you look at the areas, you go from the cities to peri-urban, and even if enterprises, operations and business models are designed to benefit directly from the proximity to a city, they can also be considered a part of the urban agriculture. I think it's good that it's not too limited in this way either. and the actors, or from the single citizens to private and public partners, also emphasized in this strategy. And also the elements going into this, from the small balcony planter boxes, rooftops, gardens and house gardens, allotments, chicken keeping and urban agricultural areas. I'm also thinking of the more business important parts like rooftop greenhouses, more technical, high-tech is included in this. And you can see from the activities that are included, from food production to teaching, hobbies, business, and all these other things that you can put into this is a very broad and very important background of the strategy. Next, please. So they took also this seriously when they made the strategy. So 7 ministers in the government signed the plan. And the anchorage and the wide scope given in this gives a lot of possibilities for the future development in this. So now the next challenge is to go from strategy to action. A lot of the municipalities in Norway have already started this project and are quite well ahead in implementing the strategy. Mainly the big cities in Norway. The mid-sized municipalities and the small ones are not that far. The ambitions set by the government must be implemented by the municipalities, but there are not direct economic incentives to the municipalities to do this. And I think the thinking behind this is that the many direct, indirect values of urban agriculture is really enough encouragement for the implementation of this strategy. Next, please. So, I think I was mentioning the incentives. I won't go into all of them, but I mentioned just a few of them. For example, the food production. Most Norwegians do still not use a lot of their big proportion of their income on buying food. It's a perception that we can go to the store, we can buy cheap food. That is the situation today. For your information, Norway produces about between 36 and 45% of the calorie needs we produce ourselves. The rest is imported. So it's definitely important to increase this, and we see it more and more clearly in the situation we are today. Now, several of the other points have been mentioned already. I just want to mention the last point here, to build competence to enable the cities or also single actors to be able to produce food and be ready for eventual crisis. I think this is extremely important for the future. Next, please. So now to the guide itself. As a starting point, it's important to show what can be expected from and given to the municipalities and the many other stakeholders, including enterprises, non-profit organizations, and citizens. What can urban agriculture give to them? And in making this strategy and implementing this, the municipality is acknowledging their responsibility, which needs to be well formulated and adapted to their own local conditions. Next, please. So the guidelines itself, I formulated that at the present stage in 4 points. So first of all, the framework in the municipality. So to make their own local strategy, making them visualize the contact information, what are the necessary processes before they can start up, and giving the available areas, necessary infrastructure, emphasizing multifunctionality and sustainability aims, the role of NGOs, and also to mobilize vulnerable groups and funding possibilities for the municipality. Point number 2, the guidelines on urban production is addressing soil quality and soil health, the use of fertilizing, composting, extension on growing crops, etc. Number 3, environment and the climate, where sustainability is one of the important points, looking into ecosystem services and nature-based solutions, biodiversity and recycling strategies. I've also been involved in European Forestry Institute publication on biocities, which will soon come out. And this is also taking into consideration these ecosystem services as the main points. And then finally, at point number 4, the knowledge and competence, how to enable the urban growers and realizing the potential benefits from urban agriculture, which is, of course, extremely important. So it's really to look at the holistic system and implementing the different benefits. So in the appendix, I have some of the points given more attention, more details on harvesting the edible city and looking into which plants that can be established. I think it's important that we do this in a way that are realistic according to how much the municipality can put in of labor, of resources into this. The guide will be published this fall in the autumn, together with another guideline for area and legislation. So this will be done together at this stage here. So just to conclude, municipalities in Norway are at very different stages, but the strategy, I think, is very good and very promising. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Arne, so much for this insight. And let's proceed to this discussion. So we are still at the webinar of innovation and legislation. And let me ask the first question to Maria. You already sketched some of the barriers of how to expand urban agriculture. Some of them were the competition for land use, and then there was probably lack of financing or funding options. Are these two the key barriers, or do you see there are more barriers to actually start doing? Because what we just heard is a wonderful scene, how it all could look like with strategies, greenhouses in the middle of the city and so on. So is the land use and funding the key issues?
No, I don't think that's the only barriers. I think understanding the role of the city as a productive area is also a very big barrier, because like I said, we have this workshop. We've had 2 workshops where we have city planners and development managers. And when they've been involved in this, they've realized, oh, here's potential. We can, and we also had developers in our last workshop. And the business models for introducing urban agriculture on buildings is crucial. But we saw an example yesterday that it is financially viable to include urban agriculture in spaces such as stairways, such as roofs, that are not used anyway. If they could be used for productive purposes, then all of a sudden there is a business model to introduce this also in private buildings. So the knowledge, I would say, is one of the biggest barriers.
And kind of understanding or seeing cities or municipalities as productive units for food, right?
Exactly. I think we need to see examples. And like Bjorn was also participating yesterday and said, do we have any examples? We need examples. So we need to build a few examples.
The case studies. And right away, the next question goes to Bjorn. So in your opinion, or seeing, and also from your own work and experience, which urban agriculture technologies have the potential for scalability and increased productivity? We saw a couple of, this green leaf production, then there was mushrooms and also what you showed. But in your opinion, what is the future of technology solution in the cities?
Currently, the the on growth of production of leafy greens, for instance, is basically is based on the fact that there are more buildings suitable for these kind of productions. There are simply a lack of greenhouses. But should more greenhouses be built, then the growing potential is very, very large. And as Maria mentioned, we have an abundance of spaces where that we can actually utilize that is not used for the moment. And they also in the cities, the infrastructure is already there. We have the heating system, the ventilation systems are emitting warm air on the rooftops. The water and the electricity systems are already in the buildings. It's actually quite easy to implement production in those currently unused spaces. But one of the things that I must emphasize also is that aquaponic production systems and greenhouse systems are complementary to ordinary traditional soil production as they benefit each other. Aquaponic systems, I mean, if I harvest 30 kilos of bananas, then I always also harvest 70 kilos of green matter that can be composted and used in organic farming in more traditional ways or in different places of the city. So I see aquaponics as an important step in utilizing waste streams, converting them into products and also into more nutrient materials that can be used in a more traditional production. So they go hand in hand, but the potential is still not there since we are lacking greenhouses. But as soon as greenhouses will be built, there will no doubt be a number of interested parties there to occupy them and start producing.
Yeah, so it's also a question who starts or who takes the risk and actually goes beyond these low-hanging fruits, which are these leafy greens that is already in a way quite actively implemented. And also, I think what you brought to the kind of discussion is this really link of this more traditional plant growing activities and then the city and these waste streams. And I think that's also something that probably holds some of the municipalities off, as they don't see this option for a circularity there, and that it might not create more problems for them, right? But to implement some new technologies and growing food in the cities. Okay, thank you so much. All of you can think. We have some of the incoming questions, and the questions are about, is the urban agriculture, can it be promoted in smaller cities? And do the smaller cities have advantage in terms of space? And that's a very good question for our Nordic Baltic region, which consists also a lot from small cities. So think about that. We will discuss it later. And the other question is the social aspect of urban agriculture. But of course, we will tackle this particular question in the next webinar more, but still you can think about this also from the perspective of barriers and opportunities. So this keep in mind, but then I will ask my next question to Arne. And thank you for your presentation, and it looked very, very good, the involvement of different ministries and the strategy already in the place. To your mind, what are the most urgent, in a way, kind of issues where the legislation should be reformed to promote the urban agriculture? Is it related to the use of city space, traffic planning, green space development? So where is the biggest urgency when you look from your own strategy perspective?
Well, yes, I think you are right about this, that the first stage is, I was talking about making the locally adapted strategy, where the municipality can see what are the possibilities in their own city. But I think to identify where are the areas and to give that information to those who are interested is really a starting point. And now, if you look at which areas that are available, it's very different from the center of the city, where there are almost no areas available on the ground. But then we need to go to the rooftops there. And rooftops can be extensive, like just a roof garden, or you can really be high-tech and intensive when it comes to need for money. So that is the cityscape, and the next level is to go to the periphery of the cities where there are more space, and you can go more into traditional urban horticulture, agriculture. So really to, in a way, compartmentalize the city and see where are the possibilities. That's the way I see it, the first stage.
And as you mentioned, this unused opportunity of rooftops, we have been in our other webinars on wood building and architecture discussed that the rooftops could be used like as an extension to the existing buildings, but just using the wood structures or structures built from wood. So I'm just imagining that the future could be these new greenhouses on the top of the buildings made from, let's say, reused wood and glass. That would be such a dream. I think it's good to dream about it and imagine how the future could look like. And also what I liked from your answer is that you mentioned that we have to think where are the areas in the city that we can use, but also what are the areas also from your webinar yesterday, Maria. So one thing is where can we locate, but what exactly can it be? So it's rooftops, it's staircases, it can be so many more things that we just cannot currently imagine, right? All right, so now you had time a little bit to think about the smaller cities. So Lucian, I'll give this question to you to answer. As in Nordregio, you work a lot with looking how bigger or smaller cities respond to different changes in this world. So yeah, what's your take on that?
Yes, I think like smaller cities, they might offer more space, which is actually a big problem. But I also like to highlight that there is one big issue in this question about embracing urban agriculture as a function in cities, which is like social, is like first business model that works. You should have like, you can have like people growing food in the peri-urban areas in small cities, but if you don't have like the channels on how to commercialize this food and make it is a profitable like activity that will give like a living for someone, for the people who grows, for the farmer, and then it's something that is not very appealing as well. So it is about space, but it is also about like a lot of things to work in business model, in putting like innovation in governance, I would say as well, is another thing extremely important, to put people together like from different departments, like in the municipality, to discuss what can I gain, what can the education department can gain with urban agriculture, what is the advantage of actually like introducing this like for education of kids or like in healthcare facilities and so on. Yeah, so I think that is from putting it short, might have, but I also think that we should think a little bit as well, like in these bigger cities where the consumption is much higher, and also make use of these spaces and raise awareness about the need, and then also try to see like how people will work, what will be like the management of like having like roof farms in the rooftops, and which kind of a building we will have. Will be like a mix of like a residential plus commercial. Who is going to take care of this? How is this product? So it's a lot of different things to think. One last thing that I would like to say, that is also like perhaps like from the municipality end, Aarhus has a very good examples about urban agriculture, and one of the things that they do is just like signposting, labeling like eatable resources in the city, which is easy, which is like kind of, you know, you just tell people where they can actually go and pick up food that it is available, like in forests, like in different places, or even like in trees, because this is also like if you want to make the city more eatable, make like with like eatable resources, and then we have to also to inform. And I think in this case in Aarhus is quite important. I'm sorry, perhaps I went a bit away from the question.
This is just perfect, and I think it's many good things. Just start with just collecting knowledge about what you have and what's available. Maria, you wanted to add something to that?
Yes, I wanted to add one thing. I think with the current global situation, the aspect of, say, self-sustainability is raising on the agenda. And Stockholm has not had a coordinating unit for urban food production in the past. But now they've appointed 2 people to set up a group of individuals from different administrations to actually look at a plan for the city. But there's also a mandate for all the municipal housing companies that have green walls, that the first 2 meters of the green walls should be edibles. So there is slowly a change in the idea of introducing edibles in the city. And if you have green walls with edibles, then all of a sudden, if it is herbs or if it is strawberries or whatever it is, it's still something that the house owners or the house tenants can utilize.
Absolutely wonderful. We have also here audience. Any one of you have a question you would like to ask? Yes, we have a question.
Thank you very much for very nice and interesting presentations. I have a question about aquaponic. What about winter time? Because in the winter time, probably you have no heating possibilities. In some places you have, in some maybe not. So if you have no technical possibility to heat greenhouse in the winter time, what is going on with fish? Should we cut producing of fish during winter time, or how can we manage the seasonality of Nordic countries?
So is fish seasonal?
I think I can answer that. When you construct an aquaponic system, you construct it in places where you have access to heat and electric energy. It's possible to have a seasonality in the system where you simply harvest the fish and fruits in the autumn and restart the system in spring. But the aim of the system is to have a consistent production year-round. And so we simply try to find places where you had waste heat, for instance, and it doesn't require so much heat to keep a greenhouse relatively warm in winter. If you can heat it up to 6 degrees, for instance, you can still be able to grow things like avocados, mangoes, every Mediterranean plants, for instance. And in the city environment, we have lots and lots and lots of these places that are still not utilized. And also on the countryside, you often have factories, different places where you have waste heat. So waste heat is extremely abundant, actually. In Sweden, we produce as much waste heat as we produce electricity. So to answer your question, yes, you can have a seasonal activity with aquaponics, but then you harvest the plants, and the fishes, and you grow annuals. But if you heat the systems, then you can grow perennials, which are often these fruit-bearing trees, for instance, and berries that often require 2 to 3 years to come into production. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you so much. And then a question for Arne. or everybody who feels free, also it's from the audience, from the webinar, how can it best be implemented that policymakers balance the need for regulation whilst promoting innovation, experimentation? Because from all of your presentations that we heard, it seems there will be need for this experimentation. There are not ready-made solutions. So how exactly this regulation can be balanced with this need for experimentation that maybe will fail at some point? So who wants to go first? Luciane, and then Arne, or Arne first? You have answered.
Okay,
everything.
yes, I could say something about that because it's a very important part and point. So, but I also think we have a lot of knowledge that can be systemized and taken into use. But the dissemination of the knowledge is really a bottleneck as it is today. We have a very good system in agriculture, in horticulture, but really for the urban production, we don't have a system, at least not in Norway yet. So we need to work more on those parts there. I also think that, also related to the previous question, that we need to look at other areas, for example, the energy supply, maybe to implement biogas production from waste in the urban areas, putting this into the production systems. So all this needs more knowledge and more good examples. So pilot studies is really wanted.
Thank you so much. So basically that could be the municipality or cities that build those pilot examples and take care of the high risks that's there. So Luciane, what's your point on this?
Just want to bring up here like the Tango project, that actually what we do, working together with municipalities on this nexus of food, water and energy. And then each one of the municipalities, for example, Stockholm is trying to implement this urban agriculture like in this test bed district, which is also like a very good taking about like this Royal Seaport area in Stockholm. It's like have been, Maria can tell much better than me, but have been like a kind of testing innovations and different solutions, and they have a totally different like governance model from the rest of the city, where there is like more communication and so on. But I think, yeah, I think it's needed like perhaps lots of cooperation between like research and municipalities. I think municipalities, applied research can give this expertise. When you together, we look like for funding. There is funding like at the Nordic level. There is funding like at national level. There is funding at the European level. There is programs like for cities that cities can apply. And I think this is a great opportunity to build up, because also we need this knowledge. We need, if we need to bridge like different like departments, we need a builder, as someone that will a new competence and new knowledge, like in the civil civil servant, like in the municipalities, to be able like to do this and highlight what is the co-benefits.
Like Maria already mentioned, that it all starts not just with mapping resources, but also actually having people who are responsible for a particular topic and place. Maybe just a very quick question to Bjorn as an entrepreneur. So how do you see this balance between regulation and entrepreneurship? Can you talk more about risks, or do you talk more about the opportunities and experimentation?
Basically, there's a lack of possibilities to expand this, as we are currently lacking buildings. If there were more infrastructure, then they will be filled with entrepreneurs filling them with production. But if I wanted to build a 1,000 square meter greenhouse, then I would have to take a loan on 7 million crowns, which will make it very, very difficult for me to reach break even. So, but if you have the possibility to rent spaces, for instance, or get subsidies or whatever in the starting phase, then that will be also possible. So, but I must just emphasize the need for for these good examples. I would like to see a good examples in each region that is basically not considering profitability in the first place, but actually showing off the techniques, showing off the possibilities, being inspirational, and also opening up for much more research, for instance. But to in the beginning, at least, leave profitability out of the question. This will come once the buildings are up, but we need these good examples that people can come and visit and learn. And they should be more or less cost-free. So
thank you so much. I think you are to some extent already answering my last question, call for action. What should be done today, in a month, in a year? So we kind of have this agreement that this should be those case studies, good examples. And Maria, also maybe you can contribute to this question and also answer so for this call for action.
Yeah, from our side, we will do this potential study and then we will map what is feasible to do now. But one aspect that I think we need also to address is that we can't just look at this from a financial point of view. We need to look at it from an economic point of view. We need to realize the not only the cost, but also the benefits on a societal level to bring this into our environments. Unfortunately, as an entrepreneur, you have to look at it from a financial point of view, but as a municipality, we need to look at it from an economic point of view.
And then we need the finance sector players to hopefully somewhat interpret the new ESG guidelines and boost the urban agriculture, right? Let's hope for that. Arne, what would be your call for action? What should be done today, in a month, in a year?
Well, as I said before, the first part should be to make the spaces available and to look into the different, should we say, actors, from the simple solutions for the citizens, more complex for the businesses and the high-tech sector that will be in the long run. So for now, to start looking at the strategy for the city and to start implementing, giving the spaces and encouraging the growers. For tomorrow is the holistic planning of the city, which gives a space for a lot of horticulture and agriculture.
Thank you so much. And Luciana, your take on this, because partly we are answering what is requested here among the keynote speakers, that there will be a case study, right, that will somewhat document some of the practices.
Yes, I think we will deliver at the end of this project a kind of description of all the cases that we have been talking throughout these webinars, and then also you have like a lot of different study visits, and then that we will also be reporting in the final publication. And then we expect that this will be inspirational, like for municipalities, for like actors that, these good examples that we are bringing here to this project.
Thank you. With this, I would like to thank all of the keynote speakers. It was extremely interesting to listen to you. We have also recorded this webinar. And thank you to those who asked the questions. Just in 2 hours, we will have our next webinar about culture and community. So we will continue talking about these very important issues, how to do urban agriculture, or what could be the future of urban agriculture. And with this, I would like to thank you all and keep in touch, follow us on our work on the future of urban agriculture. Thank you.